I took the night shift because it felt safe. Not in the conventional sense locked doors and security cameras, but in a deeper, quieter way. There was comfort in the emptiness of the office building after dark, when the traffic outside faded to a distant hum, and the buzzing fluorescence overhead became your only witness. My job was simple: monitor the halls, log entries, and keep the place from falling asleep entirely. It was a 3-story building, mostly glass and silence, tucked just off a dead stretch of highway, where fog clung to the trees like old webs. Most nights, the hardest part was staying awake. I sat in a too-warm chair behind a desk that had seen better years, watching the blue-tinted camera feeds blink from empty hallway to empty hallway. The elevator made odd noises, sometimes long sighs, like it hated remembering, but nothing ever came of them. I always brought my phone, not because I expected anyone to text, but because it gave me something to hold. Something to scroll when the silence began to feel personal. There was no signal in some parts of the building, but I still checked it out of habit, I guess. No one really checked in on me. No supervisors, no coworkers. Just a passing janitor. Now and then, maybe a truck backfiring outside, or the occasional flicker of motion on a monitor that turned out to be nothing. I was alone, or at least, I thought I was. That was the part that made what happened next so hard to explain. Because I was not looking for something strange. I was not chasing ghosts or documenting unexplained phenomena. I was just a guy in a chair, trying to make it through another quiet night. And then, one night, the quiet looked back. It started so small, I nearly convinced myself I imagined it. The kind of thing you forget 5 minutes after it happens, again. That night, I remember logging into the camera system like always, tapping through each hallway feed, while sipping burnt coffee. Everything was where it should be, except it was not. There was a door. A narrow, unmarked one near the east stairwell. That had never been there before. I stared at it for a moment, blinking like maybe the screen glitched. I even checked the live feed twice, then stood up and walked all the way down the hallway to look myself. But when I got there, nothing. Just the same solid stretch of wall I had walked past for weeks. No frame, no seam. Just smooth, painted plaster. I even knocked. Nothing answered. I chalked it up to fatigue. Maybe I had mistaken a shadow for a doorway. Maybe I had stared at screens too long. But later that night, something else gnawed at me. Around 3 in the morning, the elevator doors opened by themselves. No sound, no movement. Just the soft hiss and then silence. I checked the panel, no one had called it. I told myself it was a malfunction, that old systems do that. Still, when I went back to review the footage, the system had not recorded that moment. Just a static skip 12 seconds missing. I would have let it go, honestly. I wanted to let it go. But when I reached for my coffee, I noticed my phone screen had lit up again. I had not touched it, and there on the screen, waiting for me, was a new message. I saw you knock. After that night, the building began to feel different. Not louder, not more active, just aware. Like it was listening. I started keeping the security feeds open at all times. Even when I walked the halls, carrying my tablet with the live footage. Looping in my peripheral vision like a second set of eyes. But even that began to fail me. Rooms on the cameras sometimes looked older. Carpet stained in places I never noticed. Chairs missing. or windows fogged with condensation that was not there when I passed them in person. I tried telling myself it was software corruption, digital lag, but it always corrected the moment I looked directly. It became harder to trust what was real and what was simply shown. One night, as I passed the second-floor copy room, I smelled something that stopped me cold. Wet soil, fresh, sharp, as if the earth had just been disturbed. The room was dark, but the smell was undeniable, clinging to the air like breath on cold glass. I did not enter. I could not. And when I returned to my desk, trying to laugh it off, I found the copier had printed again one sheet, waiting in the output tray. I picked it up with a kind of dread I had never felt before. It was blank, except for a single word in the center: stay. My chest tightened. I looked over my shoulder, not because I heard something, there was no sound, but because I felt watched. Not in the metaphorical sense. I mean that deep, animal certainty that you are being observed by something you cannot see. I began to lose time. Not in great chunks, but in flickers, finding myself staring at dark monitors I swear I had just turned on, standing at doors I had no reason to approach. Once, I saw my reflection blink before I did. And always, the phone. Silent, waiting. Until 3:07. Then, without fail, the screen would light up with words I did not want to read, but could not ignore. You're closer now. I think I crossed the line without knowing it. Or maybe I was led there. Either way, the building stopped pretending after that. The night it broke, truly broke, was a Thursday. Rain had slicked the windows with shadow, thunder pacing far in the distance like something circling. I had not slept in nearly 2 days, but the fatigue was different now, not heavy, thin, like I had become transparent in places. I was walking the 3rd floor when the lights above me flickered and died. Not the whole grid. Just the ones above me, in perfect sequence, as if something were following from the ceiling. I did not run. I just stood still, waiting for the dark to settle. And then, without transition, I was somewhere else. No sound, no shift, no warning. One step forward, and suddenly the hallway was longer. Much longer. Endless. The carpet changed color beneath my feet, turning pale gray, then damp. The windows on my left now showed no city, only fog, thick, pressed up against the glass like breath from the outside. I turned around. The way back was gone. The only light came from a pulsing red exit sign, but it kept getting farther away with every blink. And in the silence, I heard it, my phone vibrating, deep in my pocket, slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. I took it out. No signal, no icons, just a screen filled with lines of text that kept rewriting themselves, as if someone were editing in real time. I read one sentence before I dropped it. You are not the first version of yourself. Something moved at the edge of my vision, low, to the floor, fast, wrong. I ran, but the hallway folded, turned in on itself, like paper burning from the edges. Doors appeared and disappeared. My reflection flickered in the glass, but it did not move the way I did. I could not breathe. My name was being whispered from vents, from walls, from behind doors that should not exist. At the end of the corridor, I saw her, Emma, sitting on a chair facing the wall, her back to me, her body motionless. I reached out, but when I touched her shoulder, she collapsed like fabric. Just air inside. And the phone in my hand buzzed once more, showing me a photo I never took of me, standing right where I stood. reaching for someone who wasn't there. The building let me go, but not all at once. I came to in the lobby just before sunrise. The light outside, a flat, colorless gray that looked painted on. My phone was gone. The camera feeds were looping footage from 3 days prior. I recognized my own face in the monitor sitting calmly at the desk, sipping coffee I never remembered drinking. The mug was still there, half full, still warm. My shift log showed entries I never typed. All perfectly ordinary. Nothing strange, nothing broken. And yet, I felt, emptied. Like I had walked out of myself and someone else had slipped in while I was gone. I tried to speak to the day staff, but my voice came out thinner than I expected, like the air around me was absorbing it. They looked past me when they answered, eyes glazed over like I was only mostly there. I left early and never returned. I told myself it had been exhaustion, isolation, maybe a breakdown. But the feeling stayed. Days passed without meaning. I forgot to eat. My hands shook when I looked in mirrors, afraid of not seeing myself or worse, seeing something else. I deleted every backup, every digital trace, changed numbers, changed cities, but the silence never really stopped. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear that low buzz of the phone again. And I feel the cold plastic in my hand like it is still waiting for me to answer. And some nights I dream of a hallway that never ends, a flickering exit sign growing dimmer each time I blink. I tell myself it is over, that nothing followed me. But then, just last week, I got an email from a new job, confirming an interview I never scheduled. It included a photo of the building. 3 stories, all glass. And in the subject line, no name, no greeting. Just one word, stay. It felt strange being back. The trees in the yard were taller, but thinner somehow, like they had grown without permission. The front steps creaked in all the same places, though my weight was different now, heavier, not just with time, but with the shape of years I had tried to forget. The house had been empty for a while, not abandoned, just waiting. You can feel the difference. It still stood upright, clean enough, but the air inside felt paused. Not stale, not sour, just paused, like something was mid-thought when the last door closed. I walked through the entryway slowly, listening to how my footsteps echoed. Not the sound they made, but the way they felt delayed, as if the house was remembering them in real time. Most of the furniture was gone, but certain things remained: a coat hook bent too low, a burn mark on the kitchen counter, the scratch on the hallway wall where I once tripped running from the dark. I let my fingers trail along familiar edges. Not because I missed them, but because I needed to be sure they were still real. I told myself I was only here to look around. One afternoon, a quick goodbye to something already gone. That was the plan. But the longer I stood there, the more the house seemed to fit around me again. Like it had not forgotten how I moved, or where I used to sleep. The wallpaper in the hallway was peeling at the edges, and the smell in the air was different, colder than it should be, like the house was holding its breath. Still, nothing felt wrong. Not yet. But that's how it always starts, isn't it? Not with a scream. Not with blood. Just with a door you do not remember ever being there. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was the kind of moment you almost don't register, like a word spoken just outside your hearing. I had gone upstairs to check the old bedrooms, mine, my parents', the guest room we never used. Everything was as expected, just a little smaller than I remembered. Dust gathered in the corners like it had been placed carefully, not blown. I turned toward the bathroom and paused, frowning without knowing why. There was a door at the end of the hall, white, simple, flush with the frame. But it did not belong there. That hallway had always ended with the linen closet small, creaky, with the broken handle from when I tried to hide inside during storms. I stood there for a long moment, blinking, trying to summon a memory that could explain it. Maybe a renovation I had never heard about. Maybe I had simply missed. But even as I told myself that, something in my chest felt off. Like when you put on an old shirt, and the sleeves are just a little too long. I walked toward the door. It was shut tight, handle clean and cool. I placed my hand on it and hesitated. The silence on the other side was complete, not quiet, but too perfect. Like the space behind it did not have air. I turned away eventually, told myself I was being silly. But all night I kept glancing back up the stairs. The strange thing was, when I went up again the next morning, the door was gone. No frame, no hinge marks. Just smooth wall, as if it had never been there. And that should have been comforting. But it wasn't. Because even though the house had erased the door, I still remembered the sound of my fingers brushing its handle. Cold, smooth, waiting. Something changed after that. It was not loud, not sudden, just a slow unraveling of what I thought was true. I began to hear things at night. Soft sounds, always after I turned out the lights. A light footstep on floorboards that should not creak. A door hinge shifting in a room I had not entered. The kind of noises you might explain away if they only happened once. But they did not. They returned. At the same time. In the same order. 3 footsteps. Pause. Then one soft thump, like a drawer being closed too gently. I tried not to pay attention. I turned up the volume on my phone, ran the fan louder, made noise wherever I could. But the sounds came anyway beneath the sound. Beneath everything. One morning, I found the basement door wide open. I had never opened it since coming back. I never even touched the knob. But there it was, yawning down into darkness, the air around it colder than the rest of the house, by several degrees. I shut it immediately, locking it even though the lock never worked. The next night, the door was open again. And the key I used to lock it was sitting beside my bed. That was the moment I started to feel watched, not in the paranoid sense, but physically. Like my movements were being mirrored from somewhere inside the walls. I caught myself whispering without knowing it. I'd be standing in the kitchen, hand on the faucet, and realize my mouth was moving. Words I did not remember forming. Something about it felt rehearsed. As if I had been here before, doing this very thing, and only just now noticed. The mirrors in the house stopped reflecting things properly, just slightly delayed, or tilted. At angles I could not match. And twice, I swear, I saw someone behind me. But when I turned, it was only my shadow, cast by a light I had not turned on. It happened quietly, the way a memory returns out of order, half-formed, but heavy. I had gone upstairs again, retracing the same path, hoping routine would anchor me. But the stairs were wrong. They felt longer, deeper. I counted them out of instinct and lost track halfway up. The hallway was dim, even though the light switch clicked under my finger. Each bulb in the ceiling flickered once, then faded. until I could only see by what little light leaked in from the windows. But outside, there was no sky. Just black. No stars. No movement. A blank nothingness pressed up against the glass like a thick fog. Except it did not shift or swirl, it just was. I backed into my old bedroom and found it completely changed. It wasn't aged or abandoned, it was new. As if it had never belonged to anyone at all. No marks on the walls. No dents in the closet doors. No sign I had ever existed there. But the bed had a shape in it. Not a person. Just an indentation in the sheet's head torso. Knees curled like someone had just gotten up moments before I entered. The closet door was open slightly. Inside, I saw my old clothes. Clothes that had been donated years ago. One of the shirts had a red stain on the collar. I never owned a shirt like that, and yet I remembered it. In a sudden rush, I wasn't sure what year it was. I couldn't recall the date, or what day I had arrived. I ran from the room and tried to leave the house. But every door opened to a different part of it. The front door opened into the upstairs hallway. The kitchen door led to the attic. The attic had stairs that went down into the basement, but the basement only led to more rooms I did not recognize. And then I saw myself, just for a second, turning a corner at the far end of the hall. Same clothes. Same posture. Not looking at me, not noticing me, just moving, slowly, endlessly, as if he belonged more than I did. I think that is when I stopped trying to leave. Because I realized something had taken my place. When I finally stepped outside, it was morning. Or at least, that is what the light suggested. Pale and weightless, like a photograph left too long in the sun. The grass in the yard had not grown. The same leaves lay scattered on the porch steps exactly as they had been when I arrived, undisturbed. I walked down the sidewalk slowly, trying to remember if I had parked a car, trying to remember what I was doing before the house. My phone was in my pocket again. The battery was full, but the lock screen showed no time. No date. Just static. I turned it off and left it off. For days afterward, I wandered my apartment like a guest in someone else's life. Things looked slightly off drawers. Not where I remembered, lights warmer than they used to be. One night I opened a kitchen cabinet and found an old cereal bowl I had not seen since I was 12. The one with the chip along the rim. I stared at it for an hour. I never told anyone what happened. Not because I feared they would not believe. Maybe because I feared they might. The worst of it is not the memory of what happened in that house. It is the knowing that something followed me out. Not a presence, not a ghost, just something familiar that should not be here. Sometimes I wake in the middle of the night with the smell of that hallway in my nose, old wood, cold dust, something faintly sweet like rotting paper. I hear footsteps that do not belong to the floor plan of my apartment. And once, just once, I caught my reflection watching me before I turned to face it. I sleep with all the lights on now, but the shadows are still louder. They always say childhood shapes you. That the places you grow up in leave marks under the skin. What no one tells you is that those places might still be alive. Not metaphorically, actually. Breathing through walls. Remembering things you tried to forget. The house didn't haunt me. It didn't scream or shake or bleed from the walls. It just waited. And when I came back, it opened its mouth like it had been holding the shape of me in its throat all these years. It never needed to scare me. It just needed me to remember. And now I wonder how much of what I remember was ever mine. Memories feel different now. Like rooms I lived in for years but never truly saw. And sometimes, when I sit still long enough, I can feel that house again. As if I am still there. As if I never really left. Maybe I didn't. Maybe the version of me who escaped wasn't me at all. Just a shadow that fit well enough to pass. Because when I look in the mirror, I don't always blink right. And when I speak, there are words I don't remember learning. Maybe the worst part isn't being haunted. It's not knowing if you ever stopped being lost. I always drove that road alone. It wasn't the fastest way out of the mountains, but it was the most familiar. Two-lane stretch that carved through pine woods, so dense the sun could vanish by mid-afternoon. I'd taken it every winter for years, usually after visiting my brother's place near the ridge. He liked the isolation, said it kept his thoughts quiet. For me, it was different. I just liked the silence between places, those long gaps where no one could reach you. No service, no exits, no cities for miles. Just the hum of tires on cold asphalt, and a horizon that never quite arrived. The car heater would take half an hour to work, so I drove bundled in my coat, one glove off to grip the steering wheel. The world outside was calm, like it had exhaled everything ugly. Trees motionless. Sky bleeding into dusk. No traffic, no motion but mine. It was the kind of cold that kept everything clean. And in that quiet, it was easy to forget that sometimes very rarely roads do not take you where you think you're going. That a straight line can still loop back. That just because you've driven a road 100 times doesn't mean you know what's waiting on the shoulder. That night started like every other. I had a full tank, a worn playlist, and the same stretch of forest for company. Nothing new. Nothing strange. But a few miles in, I saw someone standing by the tree line still as frost. Not thumbing for a ride, not waving, just waiting. And something in me, something deep and automatic, let my foot ease off the gas. At first it didn't feel like anything was wrong. Not exactly. The figure stepped into the car without speaking, without hesitation, like they already knew where they were going. I barely saw their face, just the dark curve of a hood, and the slow folding of limbs as they settled into the passenger seat. I asked where they were headed. No answer. Just the sound of breath, measured and soft, not heavy. From walking in the cold. Not rushed. Just present. We drove. I watched the road. The snow, though light, gave the forest a quiet that felt too deep, like the world had been wrapped in wool. It should have been peaceful. But then I noticed something: the figure wasn't leaving any trace. No smell of the cold on them. No wetness melting from their coat onto the seat. No clouded breath when they exhaled. Just stillness. And when I glanced at the rear view mirror, I saw the road behind us was clean, pristine. Like the snow hadn't been disturbed by tires. No tracks. Nothing but white stretching behind us, as if we'd never passed through at all. I blinked, looked again. Still nothing. I didn't say anything. I told myself maybe the snow was falling faster than I thought. That the wind was covering our trail. But there was no wind. Not even a breeze. The trees outside stood perfectly still, watching, listening. And the passenger beside me hadn't moved an inch. Just hands folded, head slightly bowed, humming. Something so faint, it might have just been the engine. That was the moment I realized I didn't remember them opening the door. We kept driving. That was the strangest part. How long we stayed in motion without anything changing. No signs, no curves, no rise or fall in the road. Just the same stretch of forest, identical trees, stitched against an unchanging sky. I tried to track the distance by the dashboard clock, but it had frozen at 7:14. I tapped the glass once, twice, nothing. I reached for my phone, but it was dead too. Black screen, no flicker. The silence between us had thickened, like fog pressing in against the windows. I turned to look at them again, my passenger, and this time, their face was visible under the hood, but not familiar. Not unfamiliar either. It looked like a face remembered from a dream, half-formed in memory, where the features do not stay. Still, the eyes were wrong. Not because of what they were, but because of what they lacked. No curiosity, no fear, not even presence, just something that had learned the shape of looking. When I turned back to the road, I saw the same road again. But this time, it was ahead and behind. The trees looped. I recognized a dead limb split down the middle, one I had passed miles ago. The mile marker came again, same number, same dent. A perfect repeat. My chest felt hollow, like my breath was going somewhere that wasn't my lungs. "Where are we?" I asked aloud, though I didn't expect a reply. And when I glanced sideways again, the passenger had turned fully to face me. They were smiling, only barely, as if they had waited for me to realize something. Not just that we were lost, but that I had brought us here. The humming grew louder, but the sound didn't come from their throat. It came from somewhere deeper in the corridor. The seat, maybe. Or beneath the floorboards. Something alive that had been listening this whole time. Now starting to hum along. I think the road stopped existing somewhere around the fourth loop. It did not end or vanish, it simply stopped needing to be real. There were no new turns, no signs, no landmarks. The trees pressed closer, and the world outside the headlights grew impossibly dark, like driving through the inside of a closed eye. I pulled over without thinking, except, there was no shoulder, no texture change, no sound of tires over gravel. The car simply slowed and stopped, engine idling in silence. I turned to tell them, whoever they were, to get out, but the seat beside me was empty. Still indented, from where they had sat. Still warm, but no one there. I opened the door and stepped out. The snow underfoot didn't crunch. It didn't even feel cold. It felt soft, like ash. I looked back at the car, but the windows were blacked out, like it wasn't mine anymore, like it never had been. Then I saw the figure. Not standing on the side of the road this time, walking away into the trees. Slow, smooth, drifting more than stepping. I called out. No answer. I followed, even though I knew I shouldn't. The trees bent around me. Too narrow to fit through, yet somehow always partying. The sky above faded from gray to static. That is the only way I can explain it. It buzzed, like a screen left on with no signal. When I caught up to them, they were kneeling in the snow, head down, hands resting on the frozen ground. I stepped closer. Their coat was mine. Their boots, their hair. And when they looked up, I was staring into my own face, but not the version I knew. It was me, without memory, without voice. Just the shape of me left behind after something else had stepped in. The figure blinked once, and I forgot my name. Blinked again, and I forgot why I had ever taken the road that night. And when I blinked a third time, I forgot which one of us was supposed to be walking away. I woke up somewhere else. A motel, I think. The kind with flickering vacancy signs and thin curtains that let in more dark than light. My coat was folded over the chair. My boots were dry. The keys to the car sat neatly on the nightstand beside a cup of cold coffee I did not remember ordering. I should have been relieved, but I wasn't. I sat on the edge of the bed for hours, waiting for something to start or stop. I could not remember checking in. I could not remember leaving the forest. My phone had power again, but there were no missed calls, no messages, not even a timestamp. Just the home screen, empty. Still, I stood in the mirror for a long time that morning, brushing my teeth slowly, just to hear a familiar sound. And I watched my reflection closely, too closely. I was afraid to blink. Afraid something inside the glass might not follow me this time. When I spoke aloud to test my voice, it came out slow and heavy, like I was repeating someone else's words. Later, I went outside. I wanted to see if my tires had left tracks in the snow, but the ground was clean. Not fresh, not melted. Just clean, like no one had been there at all. I drove home differently. Not faster, not slower. Just with the constant feeling that something was behind me inside the back seat, maybe. Or under the car. Or in the space between thoughts, where memories are supposed to settle. I left the radio off. No music, no noise. Just the sound of tires on pavement, and something faint beneath it, like humming. Not loud, not urgent, just there. I sleep with all the lights on now, but the shadows are still louder. You think? The scariest part is the thing you saw. The face. The silence. The impossible road looping back into itself. But it's not. The scariest part is what comes after. The return to your own life, your own house, your own name, and feeling like you borrowed all of it. It's the way your reflection hesitates just a little too long. The way your voice sounds hollow in rooms you used to call home. It's brushing your teeth in the dark and catching yourself whispering something you didn't mean to say. It's realizing that memory is not proof. That just because you remember getting out of the car doesn't mean you ever really did. Somewhere out there, on that long stretch of road, there's still a version of me. Or maybe a version of something else, wearing my face. Riding in someone else's passenger seat. Waiting. And sometimes, I wonder if I invited it. If the moment I slowed down. If the moment I looked too long, I said yes to something I didn't understand. Because not all ghosts come from the past. Some come from the choices we never fully made. The pauses. The hesitations. The kindness offered at the wrong time, to the wrong thing. And maybe the worst part isn't being haunted. It's not knowing if you ever stop driving. Maybe you're still out there. Maybe I am. And maybe the next time you see someone waiting on the side of a road, you'll think twice before you stop. Because not everyone who gets in your car, gets out. The building looked smaller than I imagined, though maybe that was the distance. Talking years of space between who I was, and whatever version of myself had agreed to come back. I stood at the edge of the broken path, camera slung over my shoulder. Fingers numb inside my jacket. The old asylum had been shuttered for decades, left to rot in silence behind chain link fences no one really believed in. I had passed it before on long drives, on back roads I wasn't supposed to take. I'd seen the outline through winter branches, caught the red brick and boarded windows in my peripheral. But I never stopped. Not until that day. The man on the phone hadn't told me much, only that he found something carved into the wall. Something he thought I needed to see. I almost didn't answer. But when he said my name, clearly, calmly, like he already knew it, he listened. Now here I was. The front gate had rusted to its hinges. The yard beyond was half swallowed by vines and fog. And yet the silence felt curated, like someone had prepared it just for me. I stepped over the broken fence, not because I was brave, but because I was curious and because I wanted to prove to myself that nothing was waiting for me on the other side. But the moment I crossed the threshold into the entryway, I had the unmistakable feeling that something had exhaled. Not wind. Not temperature. Just presence. Like the building had finally registered I'd come home to something. I couldn't remember leaving. The man who had called me wasn't there when I arrived, not waiting outside. Not inside the building either. I thought maybe he had left or changed his mind, but then I saw the note. It was taped to a door just inside the main hallway, scrawled in red ink across the back of a patient intake form. Second floor, West Wing, room 209. No signature, no timestamp, just the number, like I would already know where to go. The staircase groaned as I climbed. Not the theatrical kind of groan. The kind you can explain. Age, weight, dust settling into old wood. But with every step I took, I had this subtle, creeping certainty that the building was listening, not echoing listening. I reached the second floor, walked the corridor slowly. Every door was labeled, most hanging crooked, the numbers warned. But when I got to 209, the plaque looked freshly cleaned. No dust, no scratches. And that was the first moment something truly felt off. The room beyond was bare. No furniture. Just a long strip of stone wall. And a single set of scratch marks. Running horizontal across the bottom third. Not random. Not aged. Deep. Clean. And there it was. My name. Not just the spelling. Not just the shape. The exact way I write it. The way I used to sign things as a child. Slanting slightly left, with the last letter trailing off like a question. I stepped back, stomach turning. I had never been here before. I knew that. But my hand twitched like it remembered doing something it shouldn't. Something it had never told me about. I stood there for longer than I meant to. Staring at the carving, trying to convince myself it was a coincidence. But I could feel something. Shifting not around me, but underneath me. As if the building had changed posture, just slightly, to pay attention. I lifted my camera, needing proof, needing something grounded to hold on to. I took the shot. The shutter echoed too long down. The corridor. When I looked at the preview, the image showed the wall, the scratches, but my name wasn't there. Just a smooth stretch of stone, blank and dry. I took another. Same thing. I looked up. It was still there, clear as ever. But in the camera, it had vanished. Not blurred. Not distorted. Erased. That was when the silence shifted. To no longer just quiet, but intentional. I backed into the hallway, suddenly desperate for noise, for wind, for anything outside. I turned to leave and realized I didn't remember which way I came in. The corridor stretched too long in both directions. Doors I hadn't passed now visible. Lights flickering above me that I hadn't noticed flicker before. I tried to retrace my steps, but the building didn't agree with my memory. Every turn folded into another. Every corner repeated itself. I passed room 209, against sand. The second time, the door was open. I hadn't left it that way. Inside, the wall was blank. No scratches, no dust. Just cold, smooth stone. And in the corner of the ceiling, just above where the wall met the frame, a single black fingerprint. Small, perfect, facing downward. I don't remember deciding to move, but suddenly, I was walking again, hallways folding in, the windows all black, not from outside night, but like the glass had forgotten how to be transparent. I was breathing too fast, though the air was thick and dry, like walking through breath held by something larger than me. The rooms began to change. No longer abandoned. No longer rotted. I passed one door, and saw a bed, clean white sheets tucked too tightly, light buzzing softly above it. Another room had a chair bolted to the floor, leather restraints laid open. Like someone had just unbuckled them. It wasn't just illusion, it felt restored. As if the asylum was remembering itself in real time, building its pieces back around me. I came to a hallway I hadn't seen before, one with walls that sloped slightly inward, making it narrower than it should be. There were no doors, just writing etched into the paint, into the stone, layer over layer, names overlapping, most illegible, frantic. But near the end, in a strip of untouched wall, one name stood out. Not my full name. Just the middle one. The one I've never told anyone. Not even friends. Not even family. I stepped closer, numb. My mouth moved, trying to speak it aloud, but the sound caught in my throat. And that's when I heard footsteps behind me, slow, steady, soft enough to sound barefoot. I turned, heart braced for someone, something. But the hallway was empty. Except for the mirror hanging crooked on the wall. I stared into it. My reflection stared back. Except it wasn't doing what I was doing. It wasn't turning its head. It wasn't breathing. It was smiling. And then it reached forward, inside the mirror, and touched the glass from its side. I don't know how I got out. One moment I was staring into that mirror, frozen in place, trying not to blink, trying not to breathe, and the next, I was outside. Standing in front of the asylum's rusted gate, my boots damp with morning frost, my camera hanging from my shoulder like I'd never lifted it. The building behind me looked drained, sunstruck and still, like a photo left out in the rain. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't walked out, that I'd been returned. I drove home without checking the footage. I didn't want to know what the camera had seen. I didn't want proof. But even in my apartment, with the windows locked and lights on, I could feel it, that name, still echoing quietly inside me, like something stitched behind my ribs. I started seeing it in strange places. A note left in my handwriting I don't remember writing. A hotel registry online with my middle name spelled exactly how I never spell it. One morning I woke to find scratches on the back of my closet door, 3 shallow letters, incomplete, but unmistakable. I didn't touch them. I didn't take pictures. I just shut the door, locked it, moved on. But the mirror in the hallway creaks now when I walk past it. Not the frame, the glass. Like something presses softly from the other side. I sleep with all the lights on now, but the shadows are still louder. There are things we carry that we do not remember picking up. Names, rooms, moments that feel borrowed. And maybe that's the worst part of it all. Not the fear. Not the shadows or voices or mirrors that look too long. But the silence after when no one asks what happened because nothing looks wrong. I still tell myself it was just an abandoned place. Just old bricks and rotting floors. Just a coincidence. Just a name. But I know better now. I know the way certain spaces wait. How they remember you before you remember yourself. And how sometimes, they keep a piece of you when you leave. You start to forget little things. What day it is. What your voice used to sound like when you weren't afraid. Where you were the moment before everything started changing. Sometimes, I catch myself staring at the wall too long. Not expecting anything. Just listening. And sometimes, I swear, I hear the scratching again. Steady. Patient. Like something spelling a name it knows, belongs to me. And I wonder, when it finishes carving, what happens next? Maybe the worst part isn't being haunted. It's realizing the wall never needed your permission. Just your name. I had lived in the building for almost 3 years before I noticed the rooftop door. It wasn't hidden exactly, just invisible in the way certain details become when they don't ask to be seen. My apartment was on the 4th floor top. Unit, corner layout, small balcony that faced an alley where nothing ever happened. I worked odd hours from home, mostly in silence, and sometimes when the walls felt too close, I'd climb the fire escape for air. The roof was flat and empty, no vents, no water towers. Just a stretch of concrete surrounded by a waist-high ledge, and a view of the city that felt oddly distant. I'd pace, watch lights flick on and off in other buildings, let my thoughts settle into the open space. I liked the solitude. It gave me the illusion of being above things, removed. But that night, something felt different. The air was heavier, and the skyline looked unfamiliar, like the buildings had shifted slightly when I wasn't looking. And then I saw it tucked into the far corner, where the rooftop shadows always fell first. A door. Metal, thick, built into a low structure, I swear, had never been there before. No markings, no handle. Just a single, recessed panel, and the faint outline of hinges. I walked toward it slowly, not because I was afraid, but because I was suddenly aware of how quiet the roof had become. As if the city had been muted. As if the air up here didn't belong to it anymore. I reached out and pressed my hand to the door. It was cold, too cold for summer. And in that moment, I had the clear, quiet thought. This shouldn't be here. I told myself I wouldn't open it. That I'd go back down the fire escape, forget I saw it, blame the heat, or the long hours, or the way light bends at the edge of night. But the next evening, the door was still there. Closer somehow, like the roof had shifted beneath my feet. I stared at it longer than I meant to. 15. Maybe 20 minutes, watching the way the shadows clung to its edges like static. Finally, I walked up and pressed against it again. This time, it gave way. No sound, no resistance. Just a smooth swing inward, into blackness. I stepped through. Not far, only a few feet. I didn't even mean to. It was like my legs forgot they were mine. Inside was a stairwell. Concrete, narrow, going down. Which didn't make sense. I was on the roof. There should be nothing below. I leaned in to listen, expecting some mechanical hum, the buzz of lights. the low murmur of pipes. But there was nothing. No echo. Just the feeling that something far below was waiting to breathe. I pulled back, shaken, stepped out onto the roof again. But when I turned around, the door was closed. Seamless. Flush with the wall. No handle. No sign it had ever opened at all. I stood there in silence for what felt like hours, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. But later, when I was back in my apartment door locked, windows shut, I heard something above me. A faint scrape. Like footsteps. Like someone pacing across the roof, slow and deliberate. And I lived on the top floor. I waited 3 days before going back. During that time, the door never came up in conversation. Not that I had many. I barely left the apartment, and when I did, everything felt slightly unfamiliar. As if the city had tilted a few degrees in some direction I couldn't name. I told myself it was stress, exhaustion, isolation. But I kept hearing its soft scraping across the ceiling, too heavy for birds, too slow for pipes. Always above me, never during the day. On the third night, I climbed the fire escape again. The hatch opened easily, and the door was there exactly where I'd first seen it, exactly as smooth and unmarked as before. No lock, no knob. Just waiting. This time, I didn't hesitate. I stepped through. The stairwell looked the same, but felt deeper, like it had been carved into something older than concrete. The air was thick, not musty, not wet, just used. The light from the rooftop faded faster than it should have, as if the walls were swallowing it. I moved down the steps slowly, hand against the wall, counting each turn. There were more than there should have been, far more, and with each one, the silence changed. At first, it was just quiet. Then, it became full. The kind of silence that listens, that wraps around you and keeps things from getting out. When I reached the bottom, there was a hallway. Narrow, unlit. I stood at the threshold, breathing shallowly, and that's when I noticed something that broke the last of my certainty on the wall. Carved faintly just above eye level, was my apartment number. Not a copy. Not a coincidence. The same slight scratch on the digit. The same way I had taped it, crooked to the door years ago. I hadn't told anyone I lived there. No one had ever been on my roof. But somehow, this place knew. I took one step into the hallway, and felt the temperature drop, like a breath had been held in that space for years. The lights flickered above me, though I never saw a fixture, just a pulsing glow that seemed to come from the ceiling itself, like it was bleeding light through skin. The walls were concrete, but warmer than they should be. I pressed my fingers to one, and for a second, I thought it moved. A soft swell beneath the surface, like something shifting just under the paint. Then I heard it. Not footsteps, not whispers, but my own voice. Distant. Repeating. A recording of something I had never said. I should have stayed out, it murmured. Again and again, like a broken loop playing from behind the walls. I turned back to leave, heart climbing up my throat, but the stairwell was gone. Just another hallway where the stairs had been. I ran. Not knowing where I was going, only that I had to get away from that voice. Each corner led to another version of the same hallway. Each door I tried opened, 2 rooms that looked like places from my life, my old childhood bedroom, a grocery aisle. I once blacked out in the break room of a job I quit 6 years ago. But they weren't right. The objects were misplaced. The angles too sharp. the walls breathing in silence. In one room, I found a photo of me asleep, in my bed, taken from above. It was time-stamped with tomorrow's date. In another, a mirror reflected a hallway behind me. But I hadn't walked through a hallway to get there. And standing in that mirror, just over my shoulder, was a shape. Not a person, not a shadow. Just presence. Watching. Waiting. It raised one hand to the glass, and the moment it touched it, my head filled with a sound so loud and sharp I collapsed. But nothing touched me. Nothing ever did. I screamed. And my own voice answered from behind. The wall. You were already here. I do not remember finding the stairs again. I do not remember the climb. One moment I was inside that room, the one where nothing had a source, and the next, I was standing on the rooftop, knees shaking, air too thin, light too bright. The sky looked wrong. Not a different color, not even darker, just distant. Like it had been moved a few inches farther away. I stumbled to the hatch and climbed down, barely registering the steps under my feet. Back in my apartment, everything was exactly as I'd left it, door locked, kettle cold, clock blinking the right time. But it felt unfamiliar, rearranged. Not physically, but rhythmically. The silence inside the room had changed tones, as if the space had been rewritten while I was gone. I stood in the center of the living room for hours, listening, waiting for a creak, a knock, the scrape of movement above me, but it never came. And still, I knew it was not over. I started noticing things, the lights flickering 1 second too late when I flipped the switch. The water from the tap taking on a taste I could not name, like iron soaked in sleep. I passed my reflection in a window one night, and it did not move when I did. And worse, I found my apartment key inside the pocket of a coat I had not worn in months. The one I had thrown away. I should be grateful I made it back. But part of me is not convinced I did. Part of me believes the rooftop door did not let me go. It placed me back. Like a bookmark slid between the pages of a story it was not finished reading. Some buildings are built wrong. Not by blueprint, but by memory. Corners that hold too much space. Doors that open only for you. Staircases that were never there yesterday. I used to think the rooftop was the safest place in the world. No one above you. Nothing behind you. Just sky and silence. But now I know better. The rooftop is where you go when you want to pretend you're alone. It's the perfect place for something else to watch. And if it finds a door, it only needs you to open it once. I have tried to forget what I saw in that basement above the sky, tried to bury it under hours and errands and sleep. But it surfaces anyway. In the moments between moments. When you're walking from one room to another, and forget why. When you pass a mirror and don't quite recognize the pause in your step. When your phone buzzes with no notification. When you hear footsteps above your ceiling, and you live on the top floor. I used to wonder if I imagined it. Maybe I still do. But wondering does not help when you hear your name whispered from a vent that should not connect to anything. Maybe it's still there. That place, waiting behind a door that looks like nothing. Or maybe I never really left. Maybe I am still walking. Those stairs. Maybe this right now's the part it lets me keep. Just long enough to forget I'm not out yet. Because the worst part is not being haunted. It's realizing the thing that wants you doesn't have to follow. It can just build a door.